Goeiedag, good day, fellow South Africans and citizens of the world.
I've been looking around for salvation. I've been looking around for the truth. All around me I see frustration, and I looked all over till I found you. I sit and listen to your stories, and you're telling me, please don't worry. A lot in this world you should know, and love in life is where you should go. If you're looking for somewhere to go, if you're looking for someone to know, if you're looking for someone to guide you, then love in life will guide you.
Goeienaand, good evening, fellow South Africans and citizens of the world, and welcome to tonight's live stream. And it gives me great pleasure to have Bruce back again. And just for the record, Bruce is going to be doing a regular video for Loving Life TV, where he's going to talk about topical issues, and in particular, the title of his category is Unbox Your Brain with Bruce. So we're going to be talking, or Bruce is going to be talking about things that are happening in the world today and giving a different perspective to the bullshit media. So that's going to be fun. Hi, Clive. Hi, everybody else. Good to see you all here. And in South Africa right now, guys, if you're not in South Africa, you're very lucky. They have something like 12 hours a day without electricity. Okay, with the load shedding at the moment, I think it's called level 6 or something like that. So yes, the viewership might be down tonight, but most people in South Africa don't have electricity, and Wi-Fi is a big problem too. Believe me, the country is completely cactus thanks to the ANC government. Alrighty, I'm going to get Bruce on so we can kick off this discussion about money, and we're going to go way back to the origins of money, different types of money, how money is changing, how it's going to be used in the future to control us. So there's a whole lot we're going to be talking about here, and obviously how to try and be financially independent through the use of real money, and I use that word advisedly, real money, which is physical silver and physical gold. Alrighty, let's get Bruce on. Here we go. Hi, Corey. Oh, sorry. Hi, Bruce.
Hello, Scott.
How are you, buddy?
Very good, thanks. Very good, thanks. And yourself?
Excellent. Yeah, I'm great. Now, Bruce, I just want to say that it's a pleasure to have you back on again to talk to the Loving Life community. And I've just mentioned that we're going to be having a regular video from you in our platform called, in the category Unbox Your Brain with Bruce. And tonight we're definitely going to be unboxing people's brains if they don't really understand the origin of money and where the elite want to take our financial independence into servitude. So, just to kick off the subject, give us a bit of a history of money, going right back to, the ancient money and where its actual value comes from and what actually brought it about. And over to you. Go ahead.
All right. Thanks, Scott, and welcome everybody, and good to have you here. All right. So most school and education systems, and even the education that I had, never really went into deep history. I mean, in this African school system, all you really got was a little bit about South African history, more the European history that you needed to study. And it was limited in itself. Plenty of information, but really limited. When looking through old books and old encyclopedias and so on that my family had, my interest in history sort of grew. Now, I never took history formally at school, so I didn't have all of that information available. We had limited sort of information, but not really a lot. And what started to come out was, I think, my dad's interest in stamps and stamp collecting, and going back in time and looking at old stamps and old things, and then, numismatics and looking at old coins. And then sort of thinking, well, how far back do old coins actually go? So Scott probably has talked a number of times about his interest in gold and silver. And I have not far from where I live, I actually have a mint where I buy silver coins. I used to go to the South African mint to buy gold and silver when I was I was working out in Midrand, and so the mint was up the road, and it was near enough to pop in and go and browse through their museum and so on. And then when looking through the museum, you start to see some of the old coins and so on. And at the Gold Reef City Mint, they have got a collection of ancient coinages in bronze and copper and wood and other types of tokens that were being used. So looking back, we sort of try to find the records. And so we know that the Chinese civilizations, going back about 5,000 years before Christ, started to organize themselves. So if you look at anthropology, and I would recommend to anybody wanting to understand anthropology and the origins of man and how societies get organized and come together, is to get hold of Jared Diamond's extremely good either book or I have the audio book, which is Guns, Germs, and Steel. And in it, he does a 25-year exploration on trying to answer a simple question. And part of that exploration was what was happening when societies began to collectively do things together. So now you have this interesting question. You have got pumpkins and you've got artichokes and various other vegetables. And you've got more than on your field that you're cultivating than your family can eat, but you would like some variety. So you want to swap with your neighbor. You want to barter and exchange. And that's fine if you kind of agree, I'll give you a bunch of carrots for a bushel of, a bunch of turnips or something. And you've created an exchange value basis. But when it comes to transactions where, okay, I want to buy your pig. All right, so what have you got? Well, I've got 6 bushels of this and 5 things of that and a bit of wheat and a bit of barley and something else. Yeah, but that doesn't quite meet what my pig is worth, in my opinion. And this is where the perception of value of an item or an article and the very earliest idea behind supply and demand starts to come in.
Yeah.
So the Chinese had to invent a way of balancing a transaction. And by the creation of tokens, initially like a sort of a wooden token with a hole through it, which could be strung on a string, which you could carry around your neck or carry around your waist if you didn't want people to see it. They began to look at these tokens as being a tradable element that people could start to use. And so even as far back as about 640 BC, we have evidence of spade coins being developed and slowly moving over into metal because of the durability of metal as well. That was the thing,
Right.
is, if you cut up bamboo and you created tokens in a material that could rot, rust, disappear, float off in the river, that wasn't such a great idea. So you needed to find something that was going to be more usable and more durable.
Right.
And so it was really about trying to balance transactions. And of course, the Chinese also came up with the abacus accounting systems. And that effectively also came down to personal ledgers. So now needed to keep records, etc. When the dynasties began to flourish and warlords began to get organized, the problem now was that crops would be raided or villages would be raided, because you have to feed an army, which is a sort of a small technical problem when you are trying to advance or expand your territory. So they would go and take food. So what would happen is you would have fortresses that would get built, and the peasants could then take refuge in the fortress. And now you needed professional standing army, which you had to pay. And the professional standing army in that particular area was now going to protect the villages and the farms in that area. And so they had to have an exchange, which meant they had to pay a tribute, which basically is tax in a simple way. But there was an exchange benefit. We'll protect you, and then our community will thrive and prosper. And if we do it well, our community will grow. And so the various dynasties did this. And the interesting thing that Jared Diamond points out is that when you look at organized farming and organized agronomy and how the concept began to spread westwards from China, through India, the Indus Valley, which in those days, right through into Persia, because the Indus Valley and up into Persia was the Golden Crescent. It was the arable land. And so, people say, well, what are indicators of climate change? Yeah, there's some macro climate changes that have taken place. That whole region was unbelievably fertile, the Fertile Crescent, for many, many, many centuries. And then there were shifts. I mean, they found fossilized ferns and stuff in the Sahara Desert.
Yeah.
So there have been climatic shifts that have taken place, but they're slow. And the point is, as the organized farming ideas began to move more westward, they got more and more popular. And then, people got exposed to spices from the east. And they went, this is nice stuff, but can we get more of it? How can we get more of it? And so your trade routes began to prosper, etc.
Right.
But you now needed to balance your trade. We still do that today. We still have balance of trade payments, which governments make to each other.
Yeah.
Okay, through the central banking networks.
Yeah.
They do balance of trade. So these things started off on probably a small, personal, local, regional scale, but grew and grew and grew as organization around farming, the economy, growing an economy. And of course, now you started to have specialization. And the moment you have people with specific skills doing specific specialized things, they need to be rewarded. But the services they may be offering may not be anything to do with agriculture. So they don't have anything like food, vegetables, fruit, metal, smithing, wooden articles or whatever to produce. They may be doing a different type of service. So you now needed a way to pay them. And so this development of money. And what is fascinating is if we take a look back, we find that, I suppose, it's to do a little bit with egos of people, that emperors or rulers or warlords or area, central figures kind of found it interesting that it was a great idea to mint their face or an image of them onto a coin. And that was a way of commemorizing and memorializing their rule and reign.
Yeah.
And then the next one would come into power and strike coins with their image on it, and various inscriptions or battle things and stuff that they created to memorialize their reign and rule. And what is so interesting is that as we delve into the layers of civilizations, so when you see cities that have been overthrown, and I mean literally when they pull them down and set them on fire, but the rocks and stones and the building blocks remain, they either haul those off because they're going to use them again, or you just simply pile dirt on top and then you build a new city on top of that, and then you build another new city the next time it gets destroyed. And you go down into these layers. And my interest in archaeology went right back to school, where it's a lot of fun to go digging and find stuff from a long time ago and then try and figure out who used this. What was it used for?
How did it get there?
When was it? Yeah. How did it get there?
I'll tell you an example of that, Bruce. This only happened a couple of weeks ago. Here in Australia, well north of Perth, on the west coast of Australia, there were some kids playing in the sand, and they uncovered some coins that predated Christ, which came from Africa, or a part of Africa. And the big question being asked now is, how did coins from that era land up on the west coast of Australia? So, they also kind of give you a timeline and human occupation. So, you can actually sort of start saying, now hang on, that means that people from Africa visited Australia before Christ.
They were out at sea.
Yes.
They were sailing the oceans,
Yeah.
and maybe the trade winds blew them off course, but they survived.
Yeah.
Although, finding the stuff maybe on a beach and so on might mean that was like where they got shipwrecked, etc. But we still think there are so many things which in our current mindset and our current expansion of our education, we still lock ourselves into certain concepts. One of those is Christopher Columbus going across and discovering the new America. Okay, well, people were there already. So how did they get there? If this was supposedly such an isolated land or isolated place. But there's a land bridge. The Panama Canal is only a recent invention.
Yeah.
So there's a land bridge between South America and North America for movement and migration. If ocean levels were different, then the Bering Sea may have had a land bridge across between, I can never pronounce the peninsula of Russia, which then leads into the Aleutian Islands into Alaska. The Americans purchased Alaska from Russia.
Yeah.
Russia used to own it. And you say that to kids today, and they're like, no, man. No, come on. What? Alaska used
but it's true.
Used
it's
to be
true.
Russian.
And Russia actually are trying to get Alaska back now. They're saying that they didn't actually sell it; they just loaned it to America, which is interesting.
Well, it does have a bit of oil to it, so maybe there's I don't know. So you'd have to look for like a deed of sale or something, which would be a concrete document. I think the chances of getting it back are a little slim.
I would say so.
At this stage. I mean, the Japanese attacked the Aleutian Islands in the Second World War as a diversionary tactic to pull American troops away. And there were some bloody battles that took place, over a couple of rocks sticking out of the sea in flippin' cold water. But then the Japanese have also been having a barney with the Russians over islands sort of between the top of northern Japan, Hokkaido area, going up to, because the island chain runs up into Russia as well.
Yeah.
And just off that coast, a massive oil field has been discovered, which the Russians are exploring.
Yeah.
And, there's that big oil find that was done in the Mediterranean off Israel and Lebanon.
Gaza Strip.
Yeah, that's another oil field which they're calling it Labyrinth or something, which is it's huge.
Yeah.
So I don't think we're really going to run out of oil soon. It's just a question of, are we willing to explore and find? And as we do that, we can unlock economies. But there's a couple of things that we need to look at, and that is, how do people with foresight and leadership, when they have a nation at their disposal, and the wealth of that nation is being generated with trade, with monetary value, looking to uplift people's lifestyles, etc. How do you do that? How do you make sure that this is a successful model that you have? And there have been different economic models that have been tried. I mean, obviously you have your dictatorship, rulership, or kingdom type system, which is often run through a family network for many, many generations. And look at the houses in Europe.
Yeah.
Your key houses in Europe, I mean, the Battenberg family that become the royal family of the House of Windsor, related into the Greek royal family, related into the Dutch or Belgian royals family. And when you start looking at these chains and the reasons why, I mean, even biblical times, they discussed how you could create peaceful situations by marrying your daughters and sons off into other nations nearby, to create mixed bloodlines and to create a connection through family to provide stability in a region.
Yeah.
That's nothing new. But then, wealth was exchanged, tribute was exchanged, money per se, be it in gold or silver or other types of goods which were of value, could become part of that exchange. So there was many of these things going on, and agriculture began to get more organized as we marched to the west. And obviously, as we come into more modern times, we then see things like the advent of steam power, which changed the way you could do things enormously, because now you could get mechanical work done in a way that could never have been done before. The old thing of horsepower, how that just got blown away by steam machinery.
Right.
And later on, the advent of electricity through people like Tesla and guys like that developing electrical coils and being able to generate electrical power, which could then run motors, which could then do work. That just accelerated these processes. The moment you have, and I've got a series of albums which I picked up many years ago on different types of ships.
Yeah.
And the clipper ships were the ones that were racing between India and London and between India and Boston to bring the tea and to bring the spices across the ocean on the trade winds. And they kept building bigger, better, and faster clipper ships to sail and to basically... So if you were the first clipper ship to pitch up in Boston with tea, you could charge what you wanted.
Yeah, you got the best price.
You got the best price. As soon as the next ship started to come in, then there was a flood into the market, and so the bidding would change. Right, that's economics 101. Yeah. That's supply and demand. That's basically how it works.
Yeah.
The moment steam-powered ships, which could go faster and against the trade winds, came in, the clipper ships were dead.
Yeah.
The technology of steam wiped them out. Just like that. So all the money invested, the millions and millions invested in building these ships for this trade was completely wiped out. And what was that song? Video Killed the Radio Show.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, you think of the
and
Dutch East India Company. I mean, they were the biggest. They were the Google or the BlackRock of the world back then, and they went belly up. They were from the Netherlands. Yeah, back to you. Sorry.
absolutely, absolutely, and they ruled that entire thing as a private company.
Yeah.
Um, for
In fact,
300 years,
something like that. Yeah, and in fact, South Africa, Cape Town, was settled by the Dutch East India Company. It wasn't actually settled by the Netherlands. It was actually settled by a private company as basically a refreshment post when they went around Africa on their way to Asia. That was the foundation of Cape Town, 1652.
They had already worked out that their primary problems in long distance sailing were food preservation and scurvy. So they needed citrus fruits to prevent the sailors having problems with their bodies, and to keep them healthy and to keep them working. Because I mean, effectively, you need muscles to move the sails. So that's what they required. And the Cape had a Mediterranean type climate, which these guys recognized instantly. And it had, I mean, Table Mountain has got 13 natural springs that pop out from under the mountain and have absolutely beautiful, ready to drink water that comes out. There's one that comes out on the side, there are two that come out on the side of the mountain. One is sort of, I know it because I got severely injured just up the road from that spring, in the forests above Newlands, and then right down in Newlands where the Olsen's Cape Brewery is. There's a natural spring there in like a park. People during COVID were lining up there for water. So Cape Town has that resource, and it again, when organized agriculture came in, because the Dutch were inviting, or the Dutch East India Company was inviting farmers to come from Holland to come and set up farms. And they said, because of their experience in Holland, what about taxes? And the Dutch East India Company said, no, the deal is you will be free of taxes. You will be vrijburgers. You will not pay taxes. So they said, we love the deal. We're on our way. And they came in and set up the wine estates, the fruit farms, the apple farms, and all of that came in. So there are elements of the starter history of the Western thinking of South Africa that begins sort of around that time. The British liked the idea of the Cape, and like the British have done in so many other places, they went, oh, we like what you're doing. We want a piece of the action. And, you know, the Dutch East India Company said, well, no, thank you. We've got a nice business model going. So the British just brought the army along and they took it by force.
Yeah.
And then immediately put taxes on the farmers, who then, after a while, said, well, we don't like this. It wasn't the deal that we signed on to. And then they decided to trek out of the place and go north, inland, which was a huge risk.
Yeah.
Because they really didn't know, a little bit, but they really didn't know what they were heading into, which was, again, a huge risk. So Arthur Haley's book, Covenant, goes into a lot of that. I mean, that thing's 1,200 pages thick. It's crazy. But he goes into a huge amount of that detail. And to me, it should be a type of reading that kids in South Africa get to be exposed to.
Yeah.
To understand what were the motivations and how these things happen. But it is all economics.
Absolutely.
It's just
you know
all
what
economics.
I'm going to you know what I'm going to do, Bruce, because there's so much to talk about here. I'm just going to give a very, very quick run through money in South Africa, because I do have some very, very old coins. I'm just going to do that, and then what we'll do is we'll move towards money since the 1970s, because I worked at Barclays Bank in the 1970s and 1980s, and it was at that time that the first plastic credit cards came out in the late 1970s. I remember because I was out there promoting. They had these machines, and I had to go out and get businesses to sign up for these credit card machines, etc., etc. That's when money started changing from the cash that we were once used to. So just a very, very quick look into South African history. We were talking about the Dutch East India Company. Now, that's a silver. It's called a silver gulden from about 1800, and there's a clipper boat on it, which Bruce was just talking about. So that's a silver coin, and that's the first type of money that was used in the Western Cape, although it was not indigenous to the Western Cape, because this money was used right across the trade route. It wasn't a South African coinage. The first South African coin was something that Bruce referred to, which was a token coin, and that coin there dates back to the 1870s. That's 150 years ago. It was used in a place called Umzimkhulu, southern part of KwaZulu-Natal, because the trading store there, which was Strachan & Co., they had no indigenous money, so they brought out this indigenous coinage, which was backed by the goods in their stores, and that became the currency of the area once known as Transkei for about 60 years. And that predates the Kruger coinage and the colonial coinage that came out in the 1923. Now that's a gold sovereign, which is from South Africa, and it's basically a British coin that was used in South Africa. And so why I'm bringing this out is so you can see the transition has always included cash, this stuff that you could go into a shop with and buy stuff. And what has happened in the last 50 years is that privilege of being anonymous when it comes to your money has been taken away from you. And this is where it's moving, where you'll be completely controlled with every transaction you make. I just want to bring that because this is the changing face of money. Bruce, is there something you'd like to say about the changing face of money in today's age?
Well, Scott, when we look at the types of money that exist, and this is exactly what you're talking about. In the very beginning, you have your commodity money, which is the grain and the livestock, etc., that you have, which you exchange. And the two parties agree on what is the fair exchange between the two parties in terms of what it is they're handing over to each other. So when we look at contract law, even in our South African legal framework, when you look at the principles, there's 7 basic conditions of a contract. One of the key conditions that must exist in any contract is an agreement on the mercs. MERX, and the mercs is the goods or the value under exchange, or what is happening. I do something for you, and then you give me something in exchange for that. And there must be an understanding, and the Latin that's used for that is the word ad idem, which means to be of the same mind as to the subject matter. So whenever you're contracting, both parties need to properly understand what it is you're actually doing. And for what purpose. So the commodity side was simplistic, straightforward bartering, which still happens today.
Yeah.
Okay. Then there's the metallic, which of course is the coins that we've been talking about, and other forms that you have. Then there's paper money. So when paper money came in, basically if you looked at the older paper money, it says there's a promise to pay the bearer on presentation the equal value at the Reserve Bank in gold. Okay?
Right.
So when our currency was backed by the gold standard, it was backed by gold, this was a promissory note. So it was the representation of money, but it wasn't actually the money. It was saying that, if you believe them, that the Reserve Bank was sitting on this gold and had issued the paper instead of the gold because gold's heavy, man, and gold, like pulls your pants down, and and then people rob you, and it's like, but if it's the paper stuff, it now represents the gold on face value.
Yeah.
And you then exchange that, and of course a paper currency now comes in.
Right.
But there was a problem that was happening, and this is something that kind of struck me. The United Kingdom, I don't know what the exact date was. It was late 70s or early to mid 80s when the United Kingdom finished paying America for the Liberty ships. So the deal that Roosevelt struck was, and with Russia, is we will send you planes, boats, guns, ammo, whatever it is you're going to need, but it's on a lend-lease basis.
Yeah.
Meaning you've got to pay it back. Okay? But there's a war on right now. Yes, we understand that. So here's the stuff, and then we will keep a bill of what we've sent you, and then you will actually pay us. And the UK was still paying that bill right up into the 70s or 80s. They were still paying the Americans for the war material that they purchased in the Second World War. The problem comes is that the payment was often effected in gold. And moving bullion around is one thing. But until we had digital banking, that was the way you did it. So
can I just add, this is sort of topical to what you're talking about, and that is that the reason why Britain released most of its colonies was because of the debt it was in following the Second World War. Because the colonies like Kenya, Tanganyika, South Africa, etc., were seen as a huge financial burden on the United Kingdom, even though that they did produce gold and other good stuff, which was one of the drivers for them to actually, give these colonies basically freedom or democracy.
Was also part of that Lend-Lease deal.
Yeah, exactly.
The Americans. Now, I think, I may have mentioned in my last chat with you, but I think the Yanks were going, we remember that we left the UK because of the king and how the king was putting us as subjects under his thumb. So we left and built a whole new colony. And, just like your typical British thing, when you've got a good thing going, they come along and go, we'd like to have this now. Can we sort of just invade and take it over and make you a part of the British subjects all over again to pay tribute and taxes to the king, which was the entire reason why they left the guys in the first place to go to the colonies or to go to the Americas to get away from the kingdom rule. And so they had that war of independence, which they fought and won against the British.
Right.
Now the Brits seem to be a little arrogant at times and don't like to give up stuff. And on a side note, when we see the end of the Boer War and the creation of the Union government in South Africa in 1910, we need to understand that why was that war happening in the first place? Well, we had gold and diamonds. They wanted the gold and the diamonds.
Yeah,
so they sent the army in to get the gold and the diamonds.
Yeah.
And they set up commercial enterprises, Anglo-American, De Beers, and a handful of others, that now would control the mineral wealth interests, etc. So from 1910, obviously, the gold and the diamonds are leaving South Africa. Then in 1948, when the Nationalist Party finally gets into power, there's a weird thing that happens. The gold and the diamonds are still leaving South Africa. And in 1994, when the ANC comes into power, there's a weird thing that happens. The gold and the diamonds are still leaving South Africa. It's like, what's going on here?
Yeah.
There's definitely some kind of a background deal which is in place, which they can't change. Okay? So, like, come and play politics, come and do what you want to do. But by the way, here's this little piece of paper, and we actually own everything.
Yeah.
So, you can play, but if you really want to mess this whole thing up, we'll actually just sort you out straight away. So I don't know what that deal is, what's the substance of that deal, and how it actually works. But it's kind of weird because the gold and the diamonds are still leaving. And I said before that Peter Daniels from Australia came to South Africa, and he said he wanted to go to Kimberley. Now, I don't know if I was talking to one of my classes, and I said, and he went to Kimberley. He said, I wanted to see the single point on planet Earth where the greatest amount of wealth has been extracted out of the big hole in Kimberley. Big hole,
yeah.
Right? And then he said, what has Kimberley got to show for it?
Nothing.
Nothing.
Yeah. Look,
he says, so that tells you what was the motivation of the men that did that, and that motivation is one word. It's called greed.
Yeah. Well, what's so interesting about Kimberley? If you look at the history of Kimberley, the Boers believed that Kimberley was actually part of the Free State, and one of the markers for exactly where the Free State ended and the Griquas, the Griqualand West Territory started, was a grave called David's Grave. And when you actually lined that up and went north, that was the border between Griqualand West and the Free State to the east. And there was great controversy because the allegations were made that the British moved David's grave, because it's in such an isolated part of Africa, so that the line would then bring Kimberley into Griqualand West and out of the Free State. And so that's it's a very, very interesting story. And you know, the Griqualand West Territory, of course, was basically just annexed by Britain when diamonds were found at Kimberley. So all of a sudden, Kimberley became part of a British annexed part of South Africa, which had been previously run by the Griquas and the Waterboers at Griquatown. But that land was basically taken from them through that annexing by the British way back then. So it's a fascinating part of how the wealth of Griqualand West was taken away, and Kimberley was basically moved from the Free State into Griqualand West by moving David's grave. It's a really, really interesting part of early South African history.
Well, that also, Scott, then, it goes back into what Jared Diamond was writing about in Guns, Germs and Steel, was if you had the guns, you could get stuff done which otherwise you wouldn't have been able to get done. The steel part was industrialization that he talks about. And then the germs part was things like, how are you resistant? So if you had sailors that were resistant to smallpox, and you go to South America, and the Incas and the Aztecs have got gold, but they don't have immunity to smallpox, and 40 million people die out in 3 years, well, now you can walk in and you can take the gold without resistance, because the people died out through the germs. We had a similar thing with the North American Red Indians, which had a huge problem, as the Aboriginals do, with alcohol, where it just messes them up. In a bizarre biological way. So if you ply them with alcohol, they can't resist. And the moment you discover that this weakness exists, then what happens is they get exploited. So when we take a look at this principle of greed, this thing that we see, it's kind of, you sit and talk to a multimillionaire, and what they have isn't enough. It's never, well, it's what I could do with more, and more things I can control, and more things I can purchase.
It's all about power.
And so on. This is it. It's all about the discharge of power. And So greed and the power that comes from greed are working together, and unfortunately, it then takes mankind down very dark paths.
Yeah.
And what we're seeing play out now, currently, and you need to look at the little nuances and the subtleties. So why would the South African government want to have an alteration to the expropriation without compensation? They can then move on customary land, okay, which they've been eyeing, which are under land claims. Now, we know that there's over 4,500 farms which have got land claims that have been approved, but the government hasn't handed over title deeds. So why would they be recalcitrant? Why would they be reluctant to do that? Well, they actually don't want to have to hand over title deeds, because that means to come back later, you have to buy it. But if they can expropriate without compensation, and if minerals are found on these lands, they can just take them.
Yeah.
Okay? So it's a devious double step which they're playing at the moment.
Right.
Also under expropriation, they never want barren open land unless there's minerals in it. They want developed stuff. They don't want to have to create or build. They want to take what's already created and built. So there was this case down in KZN where there was this beautiful farm, and where the farmers have worked the land, etc. And there's this massive tranche of land right next to the farm that's available for farming and development, etc. The local chiefs do not want that piece of land. They want the one that's being worked, because someone else has already shown it is productive. And you look at that and you go, that means you don't want to put your hand to the plow, or you don't want to learn how to put your hand to the plow.
Yeah.
And that's quite tragic, actually, if you think about it, because
It is.
the principle of life is to have productive work that goes on. And there's that biblical phrase that most people completely butcher because they don't read properly or they don't understand it. You know, they say, oh, money is the root of all evil. I say, no. Track back a bit. Go read the full verse. What does it say? It says the lust for money. Now, many translations soften that into the love for money. But the actual word that's used there is lust for money is the root of all evil. And lust is an unnatural desire.
Yeah.
That is again rooted in greed, avarice, and with malcontent related, that you are never content with what you have, which is why you're lusting continuously for more. And that's when the evil becomes apparent, because you're never satisfied.
Right.
And this is the thing, is how do you satisfy the desires and lusts of some of these very powerful, very influential people in the world today, who
Can I just add to what you're saying there? Because what's allowed this to happen was when Nixon in 1971 took the world off the gold standard. In other words, you could actually demand gold instead of a piece of paper from another country. And America was running very, very low on its gold reserves as a result. And I think there was a country like France that had America had a huge debt to that country. And that country demanded that it get paid in gold, because that was one of the options when it came to trade. And it was at that point in time that Nixon said, okay, we're going off the gold standard. We can now just pay you in US dollar banknotes. We don't pay you gold anymore. And when they did that, what happened was the production of money increased dramatically, which is why America today has got something like a $30 trillion debt. It's a huge, huge debt. I think they're paying about a
Just
trillion.
hit 34. It's
34
34 the other day.
It was 30 trillion, I think, on the 1st of Jan. So it just shows how it's growing exponentially, the debt. But what's happened is that once you take off that great limiter, which is having a limited amount of physical gold and physical silver, once you take that away, the gloves are off. You can just print as much of that stuff as you like. And that stuff is no longer backed by gold. It's called fiat money, which is why we have this huge inflationary problem today. And I'd like to move into that because people need to understand the evolution of money and where it's going with the central bank digital currency. Do you want to take us through that stage, Bruce?
Okay, so we were covering paper money and we were covering, some of the things behind it and being a promissory note.
Yeah.
Where your central bank would actually hold the gold for that.
Right.
It was interesting that at the end of the Great Depression, there was a point in the Great Depression where the US actually confiscated private gold.
That was Roosevelt in 1931.
Yeah, it was part of his Reconstruction Plan or whatever it was. They confiscated people's private gold. And you kind of think, good grief, how could they go and do something like that? And then you take a look at the creation of the Federal Reserve, which to all intents and purposes is a private finance organization.
Yeah.
So when that happened and credit came in and fiat money came in, now that word fiat, so looking at it, comes from a Latin word. I'm looking at my notes here. It says a determination by an authority. So Augustus Caesar would then put out a declaration which became a fiat, which he said, this is my thing, this is my law, that is what I'm saying, and his word was law. So it becomes the authority which happens there.
Doesn't fiat also mean let it be? So in other words, it just happens? We can make it happen?
I'm not sure, but what happens here is that instead of the valuation, so this was the thing that was linked in terms of finance,
right,
was the valuation became supply and demand. It was no longer backed by traditional things. Now, if you stop to really think about it, the more a country goes into debt, the more the GDP or gross domestic product of that country needs to rise or to get started and keep going. Because ultimately what's happening is if you get ahead of your domestic production, you are selling future labor.
Right.
So it hasn't happened yet, but you're now selling that labor in advance, which is where you're creating a debt. And the thing is, well, then who's going to pay this debt? Well, the next generation will now be burdened with this debt and have to pay the debt. So for those people watching that are not too sure of what I'm saying, go and take a look on the internet, Google World Debt Clock.
Oh, gosh, that's a horror.
Yes. So you go look at the World Debt Clock, and not all the countries in the world are represented, but good old RSA is in there.
Yes, it is, and it's not looking good.
And okay, so if you're looking at it, Scott, there's normally on the right-hand side, it's got the figure per person. So it takes your GDP, it takes your debt, and it takes your population. If the population, they probably blanked it at 60 million. And then it was something a little while ago I saw was about 48,000 Rand per person. Can you see the figures there?
I'm actually just pulling up the World Debt Clock now. Here we go.
Okay, I'll search for South Africa.
Yeah, I'll just get it up.
So Scott, this is the way I tell young people. I say, what that basically means is the moment you get born, you've got a baby being born now. Welcome to the world. Okay.
Yeah.
Please stay alive. Please grow. Please get educated. Please learn how to read and write and learn how to count and then get to work. Why? Well, you see, this $48,000, which is now, by the time that you're 21, going to be $66,000, is what you owe the state, because the state decided to borrow money it didn't have on your behalf with the express intent that you will work like a slave to pay it back. Okay, you didn't ask them to take the loan, but they took the loan. Why? Well, they wanted to spend money. Isn't it amazing that we have this African parliament that sits there and go, well, we're going to have a budget of 1.5 trillion rand. But SARS only collects 990 billion rand. They don't collect enough. Well, no, we're going to spend the 1.5. If we can't get it out of the taxpayer, we'll just borrow it. You know, we'll take loans from the BRICS Bank, take loans from the IMF. And the citizens sit there going, this is our leaders who seem to not understand economics. But then we take a look at America and we realize they haven't observed economics for the last 35 years. And they've simply been spending more money than they have. And that's a real danger, because eventually, if there are creditor nations that you've borrowed from, and they come along and go, hello, could we have our money back, please? It's time for you to pay us.
Good luck with that.
Well, this is it. So what do? Do you sell off assets? Do you offer them chunks of land? Do you give them goods for free?
But Bruce,
or do you? Yeah.
Have you noticed that every single country in the world is in debt, heavily in debt? Whether it be China, whether it be the United States of America, whether it be Australia, whether it be South Africa, they're all heavily in debt. Here in Australia, it's something like close to $1 trillion Australian dollars in debt. It used to be about...
And you've got how many people?
25 million.
Oh my goodness.
It's a huge, huge debt burden. But my point is that who is it who actually we all owe money to? And the answer must be the banks.
And the banking system.
Exactly.
So that whole thing with fiat money, as soon as Nixon was able to get off the gold standard, it meant that he could print unlimited paper. Now, in the beginning, they were a bit reserved with how much paper that they were printing, because there needed to be balance of payments, and there needed to be balance of trade, and there needed to be a proper value base behind it. Now, the value base for debt has become future labor, but the value base was usually on your GDP, goods and services that you could produce, and your economic power of your country.
Right.
So the day I started my formal working, which was January 25, 1982, I walked into the offices here in Johannesburg. I'd driven up from Cape Town to start my adventure in the working world. And we were buying and importing raw industrial chemicals for the formulating market, for paints, inks, adhesives, cosmetics, detergents, you name it. And this was with ICI, which is the Imperial Chemical Industries that owned 26% of AECI during those days.
Right.
The South African rand was stronger than the dollar.
Yes.
At that time. Now, we were then purchasing, and this is the other thing that that people need to be aware of, because if you understand the players and the motivations of the players, it gives you an insight and understanding as to what was going on and why. Nixon's key advisor was Henry Kissinger. And Henry Kissinger had seen an opportunity when they went off the gold standard. They realized that the demands of a growing country like America and Europe and many other nations would require oil. So one of the deals that they did was Kissinger went through to see the Saudi Arabian royal family. And it's the House of Fahd, F-A-U-D.
Right.
And King Fahd, he went to him and he said, can we do a deal where you and all your OPEC friends are going to agree that all settlement payments for oil trades around the world will be done in US dollars.
Right.
And if you can agree to that, we, the US government, will ensure you and your family stay in power.
Yeah.
Because the Americans knew they had the leverage to do regime change.
Yeah.
They've been practicing. I mean, they practiced here in Africa enough times.
Yeah.
They practiced in South America,
All over the world. All over the world. Yeah.
The Yanks have got a lot of practice in how to change a regime.
Yeah.
The most recent one is Ukraine.
Yeah. Zelensky.
But they've been doing this for ages. They're masters at it.
Yeah.
And if you don't want to play ball, they start a war in your country.
Mm-hmm.
So if they can't get you to give them the wealth or to at least trade for it, then they'll just create such destabilization in your territory with a civil war, and then they'll come along and then they will basically extract it by other means.
Yeah.
And that's why I mentioned to people, you want to go and understand what happened with Angola and all the stuff around that, go read John Stockwell's book, In Search of Enemies, in which he talks about that whole process and how they built it up and how they did it. So now we take a look at this money supply, and Kissinger and Nixon agree, go off the gold standard. So now we can print more dollars, because the more petroleum that starts to move, we're going to need more dollars physically printed to actually create these trades. And of course, that's when you had interbank settlements and you had aircraft flying all over the place with actual currency. The problem with that at the end of the day is it's cumbersome and it's expensive to do that, to literally airlift currency all over the place. But they do it, and it still happens today. The easier way would be if we could do it digitally, and we could take the fiat system and do it digitally.
Right.
Now, there's an aspect of the whole concept, which is where the fiat money is also a representation, because it's not real. It's a representation of a value that has been attached.
Mm.
And once again, by a determination by an authority. So there are authorities that sit down and say, this is what we agree the price of this is going to be. And you have stock markets where you have trading going on, where values are being expressed. But when it comes between governments, they want a certain degree of stability. So the US dollar, through that deal with the Saudis, was set up as the settlement reserve currency of the world. Mm. But as we sit here today and discuss, that is shifting. Now, there's Americans who are saying, nah, it's going to take a long time. Okay? However, just look at some simple numbers. The G7 and the G20 nations, when they get together, the G7 specifically, when they get together...
Can I just say there, Bruce, that the G7 used to be the G8, but Russia was kicked out of the G7 just a couple of years ago. Yeah, back to you.
Yeah, they were kicked out. Mm. So from a population representative point of view, the G7 represents 777 million people. Okay, and the GDP output of those 777 million. If you take a look at BRICS, we've got 1.2 billion Chinese, 1.4 billion Indian. Mm. I think it's 150 to 200 million Russian, and Brazil is
about 350, I think, isn't it?
350
million.
South Africa, the flea on the dog's tail, 60 million. And now we have who's coming in. Let's just have a look at my list. Argentina, Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, Saudi, and UAE. Mm. Those are knocking on the door. And 1st of Jan, they were supposed to have kind of officially entered.
Yeah.
I haven't seen an update on that to understand if they're in there. But the BRICS currency they want to look at will be backed with precious metals.
Commodities.
So this is a commodities. This is now going to be a massive threat to the US dollar.
Absolutely.
Because if you watch Tucker Carlson's interview this last week, Vladimir Putin said something that was very interesting, and I had to pay close attention because there were three main points in there which lots of people aren't talking about. But one of the points that he talked about was, before the war, he says, we share a 1,000-mile border, 1,000-kilometer border with China. And he said our intercountry trade was about 3%. He says it's now 34%.
Wow.
Okay? So all that Russia's done is they said, well, if the West doesn't want to buy our goods and services and our products, we just turn to the next closest border and we go, hello, can we do business? And that's natural. So they do now they're doing this massive trade with China. And of course, China is very good at producing machinery, equipment. Russia's very good at agricultural equipment, etc. And when one of my mentors in ISO, International Standards, Paul Harding, Paul was the chairman of the South African Quality Institute, and he got phoned out of the blue one day, and somebody said it was from China, and they said, we're having this big conference on quality in one of the provinces in China. It's a big province in China, industrial province, and we'd like you to come and do a presentation. And he had done a project on community upliftment and development somewhere in Mpumalanga. So he used that as a model. And so he went over, prepared his talk, went over and gave his talk. And so in South Africa, the South African Quality Institute for this entire country is 5 people.
Wow.
Okay. The Chinese take him to the provincial equivalent of their quality institute. It's a skyscraper with 400 people in it. And he went, yeah, they seem to have a slightly different view to and interest. And of course, the South African guys are not getting state funding at all. Then they said, can we take you to our prize top factory in this province? So he said, sure. They took him to a factory that is building power stations. And they build a coal-fired power station every 2 weeks. 2 weeks.
Wow.
That power station is small, it's modular,
Yeah.
and it is then placed on trucks and sent out to the villages. So it looks like Xi Jinping's goal, his 2030 goal, is to electrify the entire China. They're not there yet. I don't know if they're going to hit the goal by 2030, but they are trying very hard. Because if you want to launch your country into a digital age, you need to have electrical power and you need to have telecommunications, radio, wireless, internet, satellite communication, whatever it is, but that all takes electricity. So by doing that, and what we can talk about a little later is, why was northern China, part of the sort of northern and northeastern China, becoming the hotbed for crypto coin mining?
Yeah.
It was because the energy costs were so low. And so they were putting up the crypto farms there because these were early areas that got these developed areas where electricity was now being installed. And so when you take a look at that, what China is doing, please remember this. When a president of a country wakes up in the morning, it's not like who can I go and attack and who can I take over? Because if you look at the size of China and you hear the Americans all barking about Taiwan, look at the size of Taiwan compared to the rest of China. Okay? It's a pimple.
Yeah.
All right? In the sea. All right? They're not worried about it because ultimately they're banking with them. The billionaires in China are putting their money into Taiwan. They're investing. They speak the same language. And it's not really a problem in the long run. They're not actually that concerned about it. So what do? Well, they fly their jets and stuff because it bothers the Americans. And then the Americans have to take the American resources and sea power and everything and sort of bring it around the region and then stock up in Japan because of this threat from China. And China sits there going, well, waste your money, pal, because it's really not going to be a problem. If the Chiang Kai-shek party in the next 30 years which is growing, it's the Unification Party. So if they eventually come to power, without a shot being fired, unification will happen. And the Chinese are patient. They can wait.
Yeah.
But do you think Xi Jinping wakes up in the morning going, I want to expand, I want to build new bases? No, the Americans are the ones building bases all over the world. What he's more worried about is, how do I feed these 1.4 billion mouths? How do I keep this economy going? How do I handle the blips and the moves and stuff that take place? Okay? How do I balance all of these things within my country? And feeding that population is a massive undertaking.
Yeah.
This is why they look at Africa and the resources. I mean, Africa is not farming and using its land efficiently. They're bumbling around and doing subsistence farming all over Africa. And when we talk about digital money, most of Africa, most of the central parts of South America, certainly India, the statement out of India the other day is something like 88% of all transactions in India are cash. All right? So you have this enormous natural economy running on cash. Now you want to try and introduce a digital money and bring that in. Okay? So what are we seeing here in South Africa? Well, we're seeing PayShap come in. At the time of the 2010 World Cup, my sister rented out her place, which was right next to Wanderers. At the time, she rented out her place to a bunch of Americans. And these were all buddies that knew each other from college.
Yeah.
And one of them flew in from Kenya. So, we were sitting around and we had dinner one evening, and we said, first of all, you're Americans. What are you interested about rugby? They said, no. We wanted to get together. We wanted to come to South Africa. We wanted to go to game parks. We wanted to do this. And this was just a great reason to come to South Africa. The guy from Kenya had been instrumental in setting up the M-Pesa, which is cell phone payment systems. This is 2010, cell phone banking systems in Kenya.
Wow.
And I said to him, cell phone money? He says, what do you mean? He says, there's only the major cities do people have formal bank accounts. He says, in the rural areas and so on, they don't. But everybody's got a cell phone. So the banks started working on a model whereby they could have a token which could be exchanged through the cell phones, and the banks would accept them. And that's how the M-Pesa came around. I saw M-Pesa in Zambia last year when I was up there. So it's rolling out there. And then we have, and I'm not too sure who the players are, but if you follow Whitney Webb and you listen to her talks on what's going on in global financing, Whitney Webb talks about the links into these models such as PayShap and how they said we actually don't need your central bank to accept CBDCs. Because if your market is not sophisticated enough to run with a formal CBDC and literally eliminate the cash, remembering that South Africa has just recently launched a whole new range of banknotes.
Yeah.
So we've invested millions in design and development of all these new banknotes and the new security features on them. So if we can shift you over and get you onto a more digitized money system through cell phone money and cell phone banking, and taking into account, well, I am talking about 5 years ago. 5 years ago, the data from Lisbon, the Mercantile Bank of Lisbon, they developed a digital banking cell phone system called Wizit, W-I-Z-Z-I-T.
Mm-hmm.
I still actually have a Wizit account. I don't know what's left in it, but it's not that active. But Wizit simply, the calculation, Scott, was this. People sit there and think, well, why would you want to do this? Okay. The average migrant worker who comes from a rural environment and comes to work in the city, he is going to remit money back to his family.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you go to the South African post office and the average amount being remitted was 300 Rand, the SA post office was charging 70 to 90 Rand to send the 300 Rand to the rural family. Wizard, 1 Rand 90.
Yeah.
So all you did was you got a Wizard account, and it literally came in a CD box. All right, I may still have some of them somewhere. And you sent one to your family, and it linked to their cell phone. So their cell phone got a bank account, all right, a virtual bank account. And you could now get paid by your boss in Joburg. You could lie in your bed, and you could go send mom $300. And it would be 1 Rand 90 would be the cost to do that transaction.
Right.
All right. So now mom actually got 298 Rand.
And 10 cents.
Because, and a few cents. Okay. Which she now has a little card, a Wizard card, linked to her cell phone. She can now go to a what do we call it here, where we have the interbank with the all the different banks. We're one of the few countries in the world where you can take different cards and go to that's different bank account, different ATMs.
Are you talking about Swift?
I don't think it's Swift. There's another name. It begins with an S, but it's Smart Switch or something where your different bank cards will work in any ATM in the country.
Yeah.
Because our systems interlink. Many other countries, you can only go to your bank's ATMs wherever you find them. You cannot go to another bank's ATM and draw cash. Where in South Africa, we can do that. So Wizard, which is a Maestro card, you can just go pop it into an ATM, and you could draw, and mom could draw the money.
Right.
Okay, in the rural town. So this concept, and I said to the guys who started it, we had a presentation, and I said, so what was your reasoning behind this? They said there were 16 million people in South Africa who are unbanked, which means that the big banks aren't, and the big banks aren't interested in them because their spending power isn't enough. So they don't want banking systems for them. Now it looks like things like PayShap is to catch that market because they've all got cell phones.
Yeah.
And I'm also discovering that, for instance, on certain banking stuff, because I've been with FNB since I was a student, they're now pushing me to the app more and more. It's on the app. Do it on the app. Sort it out on the app.
Yeah.
And I turned to the one lady on the phone the one day and I said to her, this really annoys me. I said, look, I'm 65. Maybe I'm a bit old school. Okay. But here's the thing. On my desktop computer, I've got antivirus, anti-malware, anti-snooping software, the whole thing, which I've spent hundreds of rands on putting in all of this stuff to protect me. And also when I do my banking, I do not type in my password. I copy and paste it from an encrypted document that I have where my password is stored. It's encrypted. So I then copy and paste it so no one can see. There's no keystrokes. There's nothing.
Yeah.
And I said, now you tell me I must now do stuff on the app on my phone, which is the most dead, unsecure blimmin' thing on the planet.
Yeah.
Cell phone cloning and hacking your SIM card is a business. And I was like, why are you pushing us there? So I sent you a slide on the 6 steps of the World Economic Forum because when we look at
let's just talk about that.
Money,
let's talk about that.
Because when there was that clip that I sent you, which I watched earlier this week, and then got that slide out of it. And the thing was looking at what these plans are, why they want to move you into the digital currency age.
Yeah.
Now, to do it, they are going to need some kind of a significant effect. So while I can't tell you much, my wife she's doing project management for a company that writes software, communication software, for the central banks around the world. It's African based, so we've got some smart boys and girls here.
Right.
But these are legacy systems. Okay, so it is how the banks do their settlement stuff, and it is linked to the new version of the SWIFT standard, which is ISO 20200, I think. And so this is still, one central bank talking to the other central bank and how the settlement processes will happen and all of this digital software that must happen. So she has, tonight she's talking to New Zealand, and then she's got Iceland and Norway and Egypt and all these different countries that they're working with, but not South Africa, by the way. So it's kind of weird. We have South African homegrown stuff that's used all over the world, but not our guys. The thing is, those are legacy systems. So somehow the traditional banking system has to be collapsed. And so Whitney Webb talks about, and a number of other guys talk about it, Max Kaiser talks about it, there needs to be a significant meltdown or a problem. So the runaway debt is one of those triggers that could potentially do this. And once they can do that, then the steps that the World Economic Forum has laid out can start to roll in. Now, step 1 into step 2 is already happening. Okay, so Scott, I don't know if you've got those.
Which? Sorry, I just had to brush off to the little boy's room and back.
Okay. Not a problem. I'm not sure if you had that particular
that document with the points on it. Yeah, but we could just go through them. That's fine.
Okay, I'm just looking for my one. I know I sent it to you, but how do I see?
I can share it with you, I think. I just need to go to a chat.
There's a chat. Oh, there's a chat button there. Okay, yeah. So.
Yeah, there it is.
I've pulled it up on my screen.
Yeah, I've got it on the screen too. So it's create an Uber class of those who are highly positioned in both industry and politics, etc.
Okay.
Yep.
So the concept that Klaus Schwab was working on, and he's not alone because he has help from all over, with the very, very wealthy, is this is exactly what they want.
Yeah.
Okay. So lined up with the eugenics movement, which is reduce the global population, but keep a nice number of slaves. To get there, they want to make sure that they are in the top position of making decisions of industry and politics.
Right.
Now, so the Justin Trudeau's and all of the people who've been through the World Economic Forum, School and College of Finance, etc., and have been groomed and got into politics at high levels. So don't be surprised if Rishi Sunak from the UK is one of those. And as we know, Cyril Ramaphosa's brother-in-law is now a board member of the WEF. That's,
can I just add to what you said there? Because it's so interesting how these politicians get to these top positions. And you've just mentioned Rishi Sunak. Rishi Sunak's wife, the father of Rishi Sunak's wife, is an extremely wealthy Indian who owns a company called Infosys, which you might now see advertising on tennis courts and stuff like that. And Infosys is a partner at the World Economic Forum.
Correct.
Now you join the dots.
She in her own right's a billionaire.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's this privileged class you're talking about. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. And it's what's the word? The internecine, the interconnectivity between these is look, it's been quiet. You've not really seen it until you start looking. And when you start looking, you start to see, oh my goodness, this one's connected to that one, is connected to the next one. I mean, the Trudeau family are connected into an industrial company that produces the encapsulation technology using
that's to do with the vax.
With the vaccines. So they've positioned themselves far in advance of the coming events.
Yeah.
Okay? Because it's orchestrated. So to orchestrate, we first of all need this Uber class to be in place
Yeah.
So we can maximize the effect globally, and we have got all the friends in all the high places. That is what they need. Okay. What they're doing right now through debt is step 2. Cripple the middle class economically so that they can no longer have the power to make their own life decisions. So what will the deal be? Well, we need to create an event whereby the world's currency market goes into a complete meltdown and a wobble. And the point is, your country will be unable to extricate itself. So you said earlier, every single country, when you look at the world debt clock, they're in the shite.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
So if we were clever, which is hard to imagine here in parts of Africa, but Greece had a problem. They were at 149% of the GDP to debt ratio in Greece. So Greece kept borrowing money from the European Union. And the European Union would basically send them the money, okay, and the money was then being spent to keep the government running because the civil servants had become very bloated, and maybe they're physically bloated, but certainly the civil service was hugely bloated and consuming a lot of the money for the economy. Not that in South Africa, let's see, that cost went from 23% in 1994, and it's at 76% now.
Well, look at ESCOM.
Yeah.
It's got about 13,000 more people than it needs.
Correct. So we have this situation where the system is unbalanced, and the thing to do, what they're trying to do, is to cripple the middle class. So they want to remove the middle class. I wrote the other day in an article, not an article, but in a comment to something that was said with the IRR, and I said to them, in 1994, the ANC government had the opportunity to create an instant black middle class. All they had to do was take every council house, every council flat, owned by a city council, of which there are millions of these, all right, all over the country, and to simply say to these people, if you pay up your rent, we will hand you a title deed. We will give you the property. So that would mean that all of these people, black, colored, Indian, and white, okay, they were in all these council flats, etc., would now have a tradable property. They could improve, fix it, or sell it, and they could trade. So there would be an instant middle class.
Right.
The ANC chose not to do that because it's not in this strategy. Okay, you don't want to have an instant middle class that's got power and economic sway and ability to influence political outcomes. You don't want that.
Yeah.
You want a middle class that you can break down,
not
create a new one. So they didn't want to do that. They need to break down the middle class. And the way they've got to do that is debt burden, or make the cost of living rise beyond your ability to earn to reach it. And this is kind of, when you see the model taking place, things like expropriation laws. Look, part of this whole thing is to stop this middle class from actually twigging as to what you're doing. You need to disarm them, because if they've got guns, they're going to resist you. When the food gets so bad that they can't afford to eat, they're going to want to go and find energy resources. And the French found out in 1789 that if you mess up the model, the people start getting revolting, which is exactly what happened.
Yeah.
And to the detriment of this uber class, which was the ruling elite in France, who ended up with their heads being chopped off. They don't want this happening again. They need to control the process more carefully, which is why the WEF and its plans are there. And I think we spoke about this last time. Their current slogan is rebuilding trust.
Yes.
Why? You know, it makes me think of the snake in the Jungle Book. You know, look at me. What was it saying? Something like that, you know, soothing little Mowgli with its hypnotic eyes. And then Mowgli would rub his head and turn his head and realize he could see the real world. And then the snake would say, come back and look at me. And, trying to hypnotize him so she could eat him. The thing is, that's exactly what they're doing. They're wanting to rebuild the trust to go, terribly sorry. We made some mistakes and stuff like that. Yeah, like that 2008 financial crash. Yeah, well, it wasn't handled well, and we bailed out the banks instead of the individuals. But some of these banks are too big to fail. That's a load of BS, okay? Because we've just had banks in America that started failing, and the big boys just bought the small boys.
Yeah.
That's all that happened.
Yeah.
But the problem is that the investors, the depositors, are sitting there without their money. And when you look at fractal lending, which to me is theft, but fractal lending in the fiat economy.
Do you want to explain what fractal lending is?
Okay. So in a very simplistic terms, I go to the bank and I say I want to borrow 100 rand. Okay. And the bank says, okay, cool. We can sign a deal where you can borrow 100 rand. And the thing is that the bank is actually only sitting with 10 bucks. They don't have 100 rand to give you. They've only got 10 bucks. But once you sign the contract and you declare you will indebt yourself, so if it is a bond on your house, they then say, well, you will then surrender the value of your house until you pay up the debt. Okay. And so we'll have a security and a securitized debt through the property asset value and the money we're going to lend you. They then take that contract and they rush off to the Reserve Bank and say, Bruce has signed a contract for 100. Okay. And the Reserve Bank says, here's 1,000 for you to play with. They give them 10 times that contract value. So now they can go, our virtual asset base, fractally speaking, has just increased by 10-fold. So now we've got 1,000 to play with. We can now open loans to 10 new players at 100 each.
And do the same thing again and again and again.
Exactly, but they don't have the actual cash in their vault to meet that actual thing. So this is based on a simple principle that if the general population is honest, upright, hardworking, diligent, etc., that eventually over the 20 years of the bond plus all the interest you're going to pay, you will have then serviced that bond, and now they can give you title deed to the house. Okay, that's the fractal thing, but it is literally a creation of zeros in a computer.
Yeah. Now this is. I'm sorry. I just want to cut across that, Bruce, because this is really pivotal to this whole discussion, is that if you look at money, this is the cash you used to carry around in coin pre-1965, the silver, sixpences, tickies, shillings, 2 bobs, they were all silver. Yes, they were only 50%, and from 1950 and before, they were 80% silver, but it actually shows how the actual degradation of money has taken place over time. So the limiting factor.
What you're saying is the face value was the value.
Well, the silver.
The actual coin with its silver content.
Yeah,
that was real.
Yeah, the money was actually in the coin. So the asset was in that silver coin that you walked around with, or that gold sovereign you walked around with. What happened post-1964 when silver and gold became too expensive to put in a coin? They then moved to nickel. And in 1971, they then took money off the gold standard completely. So the huge transition we're talking about here, really, which is the elephant in the room, is that money used to have an asset backing it. In other words, silver in the coin, gold in the coin, it was actually backed by an asset, which is what the BRICS countries are looking at doing. What's happened through the US money is that it's now your money is backed by debt. In other words, someone else's debt is actually reflected by that banknote that you go and buy something with, or that digital number in your bank account. It's backed by debt. It has nothing tangible backing it because it's just as...
Well,
yeah, back to you. Carry on.
I just like to say the dark side of that statement is the debt is actually your labor. So your labor has been sold, and basically it's predicated on the fact that you will keep working.
Yeah.
Right? To pay the debt that the government has incurred. So the shocking part, as I said, is that when we looked at the South African debt clock, and I said to you a while ago, the figure was like 48,000 Rand for each newborn baby. What I didn't complete there was, if that baby does not become economically active, then another baby that is economically active has to carry the owed value of the inactive baby. So if you have a government that applauds itself for increasing the amount of grants that it is giving to the population, if there's 18 to 20 million people on the grant system, well, what does that mean? That means that 18 to 20 million of us who are working have now got to carry our debt allocation and their debt allocation.
Right.
All right?
So
but
the
if
whole
there are
thing is
only
broken.
8 or 10 million of us that are economically active, we're carrying 3 people each.
Yeah.
In terms of that thing. And now when you calculate it out, you start saying, I've got to live for, I can't die. I can't afford to die.
Yeah.
Sorry, I've got to live to 150 because I'm not going to get to my number. Or you've got to make 10 babies, and those 10 babies are going to then have to take over your debt number.
Yeah.
But the world birth counts are dropping. And COVID and the vaccinations is having a huge role in dropping birth rates everywhere. So we're heading into a train smash. And the problem here is that if it is based on labor, and they are contemplating, and I mean this is a little bit scary, but they're contemplating that AI will moderate the internet. In other words, they'll use AI algorithms to moderate the content on the internet. But then there's part 2. Part 2 is that AI will write the content of the internet. So that means everybody will only be able to see what AI shows you. This then means whoever controls the algorithms behind AI will control everybody's thought processes and information that you have access to.
Yeah.
So your free thought gets removed. And I thought, no, come on, this is like, and then I stopped and thought, George Orwell wrote about this.
Yeah.
Where you would erase history and you would then present the glorious this, that, and the next thing, this is what's going on. And when you look at the major news stations, all you get to see is what they feed you in terms of information. Mm-hmm. So the middle class becomes dumber and dumber and less productive. And if they're less productive, they eventually end up without being able to make their own life decisions because their life support is coming from the state. So if you've got a large number of your population that are living on the dole or the grant system, South Africa is the grant system, Australia, England is the dole, the US, what do they call it in the US? It's welfare. Okay. If you're living on welfare, your big problem is that the state is then making those decisions. And the problem here in South Africa specifically is the amount of money actually in the grant is not enough to buy you sufficient calories for the energy you need to live. Okay, so if you take a look at, these points, point 6 is once they've got all the controls they want implemented and the population is totally dependent on the system and the state, they'll remove the promised entitlements. What's the ultimate of that? Is you become impoverished.
Yeah.
And you become enslaved. And you will be too weak to resist, physically too weak to resist. And when people start to die out and starve in large numbers, the state will say, well, that's good, that it means there's more left over for the rest of you. Okay, it's easier for us to feed the rest of you now because more people have died off. The weak have died out, so therefore, the fittest will survive. If you think that that is a reasonable outcome for the planet, these steps here, this is where it's going.
Yeah.
That is what they want.
And
they want to have total control, and they want you to be without any ability to challenge what they're doing.
And can I just add to that, and I think you'll agree, Bruce, that the central bank digital currency that they're bringing in, it's basically monitored. Every single transaction you make will be monitored, which means that some of the things they can do, as an example, is they can actually give you a timeline to use that money. So in other words, you might have to use it within, let's say, 6 months. Otherwise, they'll just take it off as a tax and say, well, obviously you didn't need the money, so we're taking it away.
No, we delete it. We delete it.
We delete it, yeah.
Now, they'll delete it. So they've got a thing where they can say, well, we're giving you a quota. So once you get to your quota of spending on a particular thing, that's it. So if they say, oh, gosh, you can have 2 packs of cigarettes a month. The guy says, hey, I smoke 2 a day, 2 packs a day. No, we're giving you 2 packs a month. You try and buy the 3rd pack. Your money is blocked. Your transaction is blocked because the state said you can only have 2 packs.
Yeah.
So eventually, how many calories will they let you have? How many calories do you need to live on? Well, I need 4,000 calories a day. Oh, no, we don't. We think 2,500 is enough.
Yeah.
You go, no, man, I'm going to be a sloth. Yes, we would like a lot of sloths. Because sloths that move slowly and can't think for themselves are good for our model, but not for yours.
And you know what the nasty little thing in the room is, Bruce, and I think this is part of the plan, is with climate change, what they're going to do when they get to that stage 6 that you talked about, is that the useless eaters who are not productive, who are creating carbon dioxide and cannot pay the carbon tax, will be disposed of because they are useless eaters. And that way they'll be able to bring down the population quite dramatically. So there are a lot of little things tied up in here that they're not telling you about. It's all by deceit, deception, and it's satanic. That's where this whole thing is going.
So point 3, the way that they're going to get point 3 is if they can get a banking collapse, if they can collapse the banking system, and then the offer will be, we're going to start with a new slate. So sign here, and we will then remove all your debt, okay? And we will change the economic system, and we will go to, guess what? A basic income grant.
Yeah.
What did Cyril talk about at Sona a week ago?
What about Klaus Schwab? You will earn nothing, but you will be happy.
Basic income grant.
Yeah.
So you can see these steps are unfolding by different governments at different times. But I mean, there's elections happening all over the world this year anyway. And I think one of the startling things that comes in is, I know Christine Anderson, if you follow her in the European Parliament, just gave an absolute stompingly good speech.
She's great.
On the deception of climate change completely. Yes. If you want to follow somebody that gives you the real raw facts, get hold of Tony Heller, realclimatescience.com. Tony Heller goes and he draws out the newspaper articles because he was in the US Forestry Department, and he pulls out the information. So there was some screaming youngster shouting about, oh, it's going to get so hot and there's going to be more wildfires. Well, 2023 was a bit disappointing because it was the lowest wildfires in world history. You know, in the past 100 years of tracking the number of burn acreage of wildfires in the US, 2023 was the lowest since 1998, I think, in terms of another low year.
Yeah.
So you can't use that one as a marker for climate change and temperature increase. And as I say to people, you know, when I teach environmental studies and I teach environmental management, I say to them, which one is heavier, the oxygen molecule or carbon and two oxygens linked together? Carbon is the central building block, which has got 4 available places where other molecules can attach. And if you've got 2 oxygens on carbon, which one do you think is, from a molecular weight, is heavier? Well, it's the CO2. So will the CO2 rise or will it sink? Will the oxygen rise or will it sink? And the obvious answer is the CO2 will sink. Well, where are all the plants? On the surface. They need the CO2.
Yeah.
So we need to educate people to cut through the rubbish, to understand the realities, and to see how they're being played.
Can I just add to what you're saying, because this is something that a lot of people don't understand when we talk about CO2, and that is that the air that you're breathing right now is about 75% nitrogen. It's about 20% oxygen. There's about 3% in other bits and pieces, and carbon dioxide is 0.04% of the air that you breathe, and that's the one they're making a huge noise about.
Yeah, so 400 parts per million, and at 230 parts per million, the Earth was heading towards a starvation catastrophe of the collapse of agriculture. So the industrialization that has happened and then pumped more CO2 into the atmosphere, we have now started greening the planet more than it was a while back. And satellite photographs have actually shown this.
Yeah.
So we have something that people need to understand. And unfortunately, I think the kind of people that follow your channel are awake enough to have understood that there is real information of what's going on, and then there is the narrative. And the narrative being put out by the state is designed to deceive and designed to keep you asleep.
Yeah.
But as people shift over and their brains become unboxed and they become more alert, alive, and aware of what is taking place, then there's a second step. Are you going to take responsibility and are you going to start acting? So we've had local communities talking about, let's do cash Fridays. In other words, go to the shops with cash on a Friday.
Right.
So then you walk into your local Woolies and you go, 1 in every 2 tills at Woolworths in South Africa is now cashless. So now you're going to hold up the queue because you want to pay with cash.
Yeah.
So if we force cash transactions, so when in Greece they had this huge debt problem, the inflation was so bad and the tax was so bad. Now this is a story I heard, so it's not corroborated entirely, but this is what I heard. Was you would go to a restaurant and there'd be 2 menus, and the restaurant would say, how are you going to pay? I'm going to pay with a credit card. Right, this is your menu. Well, what's the other menu? Oh, this is the menu if you're going to pay with cash. No fees, no taxes, no VAT is included in the cash price, but everything is included in your credit card price. So how would you like to pay for your meal? And the people began to switch over to cash.
Yeah.
Okay, so the government, so now they trigger the population, and the government now starts getting frustrated because it's not collecting enough VAT revenue into its coffers to pay for its bloated government. And what was happening was the Greek government had to borrow money from the European Union Central Bank to service the interest on its debt. So the money would literally, we're sending you the money, and the money turns around and goes back to the central bank just to pay the interest bill. So they had this huge problem. And then somebody in Greece came up with a fabulous idea. And what's his surname? Andreas. He's a Greek guy who's a Bitcoin guru. Andrea Papadopoulos, something like that. Andreas, I know his first name because I can pronounce that. And he spotted something, and he said, I'm hearing this talk in the Greek Parliament that they have been looking into the pension funds. And they are looking at these pension funds. By the way, our South African government is looking at pension funds. But first, they're looking at all the money sitting in medical aids, and they want to get their little fingers on that, which is why they want a national health insurance.
Right.
So they can get their hands on all the savings, the medical savings accounts in the country. And if you don't think I'm joking, when they move, your medical savings will become the state money.
Yeah.
Okay? And some people are built up because, if you're getting older, you're going to have more medical expenses in your later years in life. And you are going to need to bank more medical savings. And if the government decides it's going to sweep them off the board into their little pockets or into their little system, they'll just do it. And they can do it by a stroke of a pen. So Andreas was taking a look at what was going on in Greece. And he said, these guys are eyeing the pension funds. So he's in America. He phones his mom. He says to his mom, who's a pensioner, Mom, you need to get your money out of the pension fund. And his mom says, what's going on? She says, you need to get your money out. So she says, well, what do you mean? He says, the government is going to try and take it. So she says, you can't be serious. He says, these people can get up to anything.
Yeah.
So eventually, after much negotiation, because Mom is old world, Mom says, all right, so what do you suggest? He says, we'll convert your pension into Bitcoin. She says, what's that? He said, don't worry, I know what Bitcoin is, it's fine.
Yeah.
And he lives on Bitcoin. So he moves her money into Bitcoin. And about 6 months later, the Greek government decided that everybody's pension fund would take a 20% haircut. You don't really need all that money, do you, to live on? So we're just going to give it a haircut. We're just going to trim off 20% of your life savings because we need it and we don't think you need it. Okay, and when it happened, his mom turned around and said, what are you, a prophet or something? You saw it was coming. He said, it's logical. It's the stuff that's coming.
Yeah.
It's like Peter Schiff on his gold broadcast has been saying, people say I'm predicting doom, I'm predicting gloom. He says, I'm not predicting anything. I am watching the numbers.
Yeah.
I am watching the realities. I am looking at, is this system of massive debt sustainable? Can it work? Will it work? And at some point it's going to run out. So when they tell you that by 2036, the American social welfare system will run out of money, it will be bankrupt. So all of those people taking social welfare handouts right now, they will go, terribly sorry, I don't know what you're going to eat tomorrow, but there's no money today. Thank you very much for being part of our system. Have a nice life. What's going to happen? There'll be riots in the streets. There'll be looting and all the rest like that's going to go on because you've just created a 1789 in France. You've created the French Revolution.
Yeah.
All right. But if you now have your homeland security all armed, you will round all these people up and send them off to a camp. Okay. The question is, if there's no more welfare money, how are you going to feed them?
Well, you won't.
Okay.
You'll just get rid of them.
You're not. You're not going to feed them. You're not going to be able to.
Yeah.
You won't have the ability to do that. In the UK, they've already said the pension fund market in the UK is going to hit a brick wall. I can't remember the date that they mentioned, but it's not far off. It's like 2027 or 2032 or something like that. That the amount of people entering the pension market will overwhelm the amount of pensions that exist.
Yeah. And I think the scary thing is in South Africa, that timeline is much shorter. I mean, South Africa, when it comes to SASSA payments, They're in great peril. Look, I just want to.
Yeah, it's huge.
I just want to cover another aspect of this whole story, which I think we need to cover, because we've gone into a lot of really interesting stuff, and thank you for that, Bruce. It's been great. But I just want to draw attention to people, and I know I hammer this, but one of the safest forms of money is physical silver and physical gold. And that's a silver 1 ounce medallion. It's actually from DCX Bullion. And that actually holds value, because the actual value is in the metal in that medallion. That's where the value is. It's not debt. It's not anything else. If you buy gold, obviously it's a lot more expensive. It's about 80 times more expensive. That little gold sovereign there, it's about 1/4 of an ounce. It's probably worth about 10,000 rand. That little guy. Think about it. Back in 1961,
So
that would have been worth
today,
2 rand. Yep.
Yeah. So I get stuff from the Gold Reef City Mint, which is in Germiston,
Oh, yes.
which is not far from me. Okay. So they send me a bulletin every couple of days on what's happening with the price.
Right.
All right. And I've been for quite a long time now. I've been buying gold and silver. Okay, but over here is, I don't know how well you can see that.
Yeah, I can see
This
that.
is a 1 ounce silver Krugerrand.
Yes.
Okay. So this 1 ounce silver Krugerrand, when I bought it early January, was 540 Rand. It's now 625.
Yeah.
Okay, that's today's price.
Well, I can
It's
give you another example of that, and this is during COVID and back in 2021, December 2021 to be exact. I was here on Loving Life TV. I had a live stream, and I was saying to people, guys, if you want to store value, get yourself into gold and silver. And I remember, and it's there on the actual live stream, I said you can buy an ounce of gold today, this is back in December 2021, for 21,000 Rand. Okay? 1 ounce of gold. Today, that same 1 ounce of gold will cost you over 38,000 Rand. That's nearly 100% increase in 3 years.
So a minted 10 gram gold bar, today's price, 14,870. I was given many, many years ago by a girlfriend. I was given a 1/10 Krugerrand. That's $6,500 right now. She bought it for like $60, $70.
Yeah.
Okay, that's 6,500 Rand right now.
Yeah.
1/10. This little baby jobby. And so this is the thing that people don't really understand. We haven't really, as a South African market, gone into this in great detail. When you look at a thing called a dowry, when you get married and you have basically, the husband and wife, you're bringing assets into the marriage. You kind of wonder, why do certain cultures love to? Well, I mean, the modern thing is they go pin money on the couple, but basically the old way was you actually drape gold chains and stuff, and you give them gold. And in India, this is extremely popular, in Pakistan and so on. But if you look at the percentage, like 3 to 5% of the world gold trade is in jewelry. The rest is coins and bullion. And when we take a look at something like this, okay, remember I mentioned Peter Daniels.
Yeah.
Peter Daniels is a billionaire in Australia, and he made his money in property. And Peter Daniels has created a family bank. And his banknotes that he produces in his family bank have a strip or thread of gold running through the banknote. So what he says is, you can set fire to this banknote and you'll be left with the gold in your hand, which means it's got the value is there.
Right.
Okay, the value never goes away. So I was involved with a network marketing affiliate scheme business a couple of years ago that was producing a crypto token backed with real gold.
Right.
And one of the things that they produced was actually a banknote, was a note. And embedded in the note was 1 gram of gold. In the note, you could get 2 gram, 5 gram, 10 gram notes that they were producing. And unfortunately, some unscrupulous people came along, got into that particular business and started to do funny stuff. And the owner basically had to get out.
Yeah.
I see that he is launching something with Mindbase this week, and I missed it. It was launched on Tuesday, and I actually missed the launch of what Harold Seitz was doing. I'd love to see, because Harold's vision was the average person, the average man in the street, and his business was called Carrot Bars. His average man in the street can't afford to buy gold and silver in big denominations.
Yeah.
Secondly, with the rising price of precious metals, when it comes to going into a market, if I take that Kruger Rand I've just shown you, the silver Kruger Rand, it's 625 Rand. So how do you give me change? Remember, we started by saying the whole original thing with money was how to balance a transaction.
Right.
And if there was a leftover value, how do you account for that leftover value? And you would create a monetary token to balance the transaction. So if I now go to somebody and I want to buy something in a shop or a place, and I bring in that coin, so if I bring in a Kruger Rand at $43,000, sorry, sir, we don't carry change for that. It's not some,
you can buy the shop for that.
Till, yeah. We don't have enough change. We can't change one of those.
Yeah.
So a 1/10 Kruger Rand or a 1 gram minibar. But the 10 gram is $14,000. So I mean, even that is not really daily goods and services tradable, if you really want to put it that way.
Yeah.
So you're kind of stuck. You really want something that's in a small denomination, but still has that value. And this is where we're going into the gram units might start to have value, and certainly with silver and gold. So there are now mints that are producing mini bars in these, and those might be worth starting to collect because you need to think ahead and say, because silver has been definitely undervalued for a long time.
Yeah.
So, the 625. Oh, it's only $21.
I'm going to make a prediction. I'm going to make a prediction right here, right now. And that is by the end of June this year, silver will be over $30 an ounce. I'm going to make that prediction right now because there is so much happening. And
well, that's $1,000.
Yeah.
Now we're heading close to 1,000 Rand. And the guys are saying, they have an offer at the Gold Reef City Mint in Germiston. You can buy a silver box, and it's 500 1-ounce Kruger Rands. But it's $33,000, I think, is the pricing that they had. Let me just see if I can find
500. Only 33,000. Wow.
Wait. Was it 33,000?
No, that'd be a lot more, surely.
Yeah, Gold Reef City Mint.
No, there'd be about 500,000 Rand.
Monster box. Now this is Kruger Rands, 1-ounce silver.
Yeah.
Monster box of 500 coins. 268,000 Rand plus that comes to 308,200.
Yeah.
Okay, wow. So that's for silver, not gold. Okay, so 300. So I don't know who's got 300 grand floating about, but if you do, you can buy this monster box.
Yeah.
Okay, and all of these have got certificates of authenticity with them. Silver bullion bars.
Yeah. Can I just get back to your
list here?
Can I just get back to your point about 1 gram silver for buying stuff, which makes a lot more sense with the price of silver going the way it is. I was in the fortunate position that back in the 1990s, 2000s, I used to be very, very busy on a program or online like eBay in South Africa called Bid or Buy. And whenever anyone sold bulk silver coins like tikkies, sixpences, shillings, etc., I bid and secured those coins. I've got thousands of tikkies, which each have about a gram of silver. I've got a huge amount of sixpences, which have about twice as much silver. Same, I've got 1,000 crowns, the old 5 shilling silver crown in South Africa, which have about 3/4 of an ounce of silver. But I collected these over years and years and years, and I paid practically nothing for them. And I've just sat on them, and this is something I want to say to people, that look, when you buy physical silver and physical gold, you're not buying it as an investment like buying shares in Microsoft or something like that. You're buying it as financial security, because when the fiat money system collapses, the only money that will be left will be physical gold and physical silver. And you can take that metal to any shop and they will jump at doing business with you, because it's real money. And they need money to survive. So, the price of silver and gold at that time will just go absolutely through the roof. And it's interesting.
This is it.
It's interesting, Bruce, because right now I've noticed that Bitcoin is going through the roof. It's hit over $50,000 per coin, whereas in just a couple of months ago it was about $20,000 a coin. So, Bitcoin at the moment is just exploding in price. But gold and silver, believe me, when the shit hits the fan, all these things like Bitcoin are going to collapse, because they depend on electricity and power and internet, and when things really go pear-shaped, you'll be battling to try and get to your Bitcoin, because it's just a bit of code. Whereas
here's the interesting thing is, it looks like because the whole idea is not to bring the entire grid down. To bring the grid down is not the goal. To collapse the banking system, the legacy banking system, the traditional banking system, that's the goal of what the impending event is. Now, there are people saying it's the next 3 months, but I've heard people like Robert Kiyosaki saying, and it's one of his books that I've got, talking about the impending money collapse. And he's wise enough to say, I can't tell you when, but it is when the numbers get to the right precipice that it will trigger a cascade of things that are going to happen. And what Max Kaiser was saying about Bitcoin, he says, you've really got to stop and think, why would the Black Rocks and the Vanguards, etc., want to develop a Bitcoin EFT? Exchange Traded Fund, or ETFs. He says because they can see value in that. And this is where they want the blockchain to survive. Okay, so they do not wish to pull down the total electricity grid and to pull that down, because the United States Department of Justice, and when I heard this, is like, what? Are holding massive amounts of Bitcoin. All right. So what is it that
Bitcoin that they've impounded?
That's
from people who've done the wrong thing with crypto.
Correct. Okay, but they're not getting rid of it.
No,
they're hanging on to it. And so Kaiser was saying that in the last 4 years, if you hold Bitcoin and you've held Bitcoin for the last 4 years, I mean, I have a multi-currency e-wallet. You have not lost a penny, okay? Because it will go through those swings and those dips. And then he says there are people out in the market that say to you, but Bitcoin is not backed by anything. And he says in reality, it is backed by energy, because it requires more and more and more electricity to be put into the system to increase the hash rate. And he says, if you increase the hash rate, you unlock the numerical values and you release the Bitcoins into the market. And so the new generation of computational chips that are coming out, and there's a new player emerging with high-speed computational chips that's coming out, with more and more of the farming and mining that's going on, you're going to need more electrical infrastructure to put in. Hence, as I said, China's putting in a coal-fired power station every 2 weeks.
Yeah. And
people have been capitalizing. I mean, one of the big mining farms is in Iceland because they're using geothermal for the electrical generation, which is coming out of the ground, so it's free. And it's cold enough to keep everything cool.
Right.
In terms of inside the actual farm itself. And that was quite fascinating. So I joined into a crypto mining farm up in northern part of Texas a while ago. But then after a couple of years, that whole thing collapsed. Now, they were supposed to send me all my cards, which I had paid for, but nothing is pitched up on my doorstep. Now, I don't know whether the South African Post Office knows where I live, but they never returned anything to me from that point of view.
Yeah.
No, I ordered parts. I drive a Toyota Prius, and the battery is 28 cells, and you can buy individual cells, not from Toyota, but from other places. And I actually ordered cells from California. The guy posted, this is a couple of years ago, 2013, 2014 or something. The guy posts them from America. They got to South Africa in 4 days.
Wow.
They got to my house in 6 weeks.
Oh, jeez. That's crazy. You know, I just want to tell people a little story about Bitcoin. I mean, Bitcoin is a new phenomenon. It came out in about 2008, 2009. And back then, when it first came out, you could pick up a Bitcoin for about a cent. Okay, so that's when it first came out. And there was one...
Less than a cent. Less than a cent.
And there was one famous instance where this guy had a shitload of Bitcoin. And he went to a McDonald's. And he didn't have any cash. And he said to this guy behind the counter, I've only got Bitcoin. And this guy said, what's Bitcoin? He said, it's this new cryptocurrency, da-da-da. And he said, look, I know nothing about it. He said, look, I'll do you a deal. I'll give you 150 Bitcoin if you'll give me a hamburger. And this guy behind the counter, not realizing, he's probably feeling like this poor guy, he's probably starving. So he said, yeah, sure. So anyway, the transaction was made. He got these 150 Bitcoin for the price of a hamburger. And today, one Bitcoin is worth over 50,000 US dollars. Multiply that by 150, and you come up close to 7.5 million, somewhere around there. It's
dollars?
Dollars, US
and if
dollars.
You convert that into South African,
it's about 150,000. No, sorry, 150 million rand. Yeah.
So there is a business. There's a business I'm investigating at the moment.
Yeah.
It's a business opportunity. It's to buy gold and silver at cost. Okay. So I'm buying directly from a dealer. All right. And and I'll pay the extra for the vault services as well because I want to store it, and I pay for the vault in cash so that it's not traceable.
Right.
And there are a number of vaults around in South Africa. So people just have got to start being wise.
Yeah.
One of the things that you've also got to watch out for is the stablecoin market and how there are big players moving into stablecoins. And the question is really why. So USDT and Tether are stablecoins, which is basically pegged 1-to-1 to the dollar.
Right.
Now, here's the advice I was given by guys who play crypto quite seriously. They said, so you buy Stellar, you buy Ethereum, you buy Bitcoin, you buy Monero. There are about 12 to 15 sort of primary cryptocurrencies and another 2,500 others floating around. Maybe there's more floating in the market. Yeah. But there's about 15 serious ones that you can look at. And he said a lot of the transactions, remember there's what they call gas money that's needed. So if you want to move Bitcoin from one wallet to another, you need to have some Ethereum which pays the movement of the tokens. In other words, it's a fee into the blockchain to effect the transaction, and so that your 10 ledger computers needs it. I think it's between 6 and 10 computers are needed to confirm the transaction, and then the movement of the Bitcoin takes place, or the movement of whichever token that you're using takes place. So you need a bit of gas money, and that's normally paid in Ethereum. Okay? Now, Stellar, they say some Stellar is backed with gold. But here's the thing. If you've got a whole bunch of crypto, and you're looking at the market, and you see the ebb and flow, and you decide this coin looks like it's peaking, and it's probably going to have a dive a bit later. So you decide, I'm going to sell at the peak. Okay, now, trying to predict or pitch the market is exceptionally difficult.
Right.
Okay, unless you have some inside track information. But the trick is, when you sell at the peak, you don't sell into and then cash out in rands. That's a big mistake. What you do is you convert your sale into USDT or Tether at 1-to-1, and you park it inside the blockchain. You park that money. Now, later on, you see that the currency's dropped, and now it's turning up again at a low point. Now you take your parked cryptocurrency in Tether, and you go buy that token again at the low price, and you get more of it.
Yeah.
And that then goes into your wallet, and now you grow it again, and then you repeat the cycle.
Yeah.
The moment you cash out into your physical currency or fiat currency in your country, you pay tax. Okay.
Yeah.
So this is where vendors that are going to say to you, so I offer ISO international training, I offer auditing, I offer consulting, etc. If I then say to people, I have a crypto wallet, if you want to do business with me, you can pay me in one of the cryptos. Let's say it's Litecoin. Okay, another favorite. You're going to do Litecoin. Fine. Then pay me the equal value of my invoice in Litecoin into my account. By the way, there'll be no VAT. Okay. And the government's not going to see the transaction. All right. Now, when we can start exchanging goods between each other in a quick way, and look, I mean, we can do settlements now in under 10 minutes. So they're trying to find a faster way to get settlement, and that was something Harold Sykes was working on, was how to get very, very fast, almost a credit card that handles fiat currency and multiple cryptocurrencies on a single credit card. This is the project he was working on when these other characters came along and collapsed the business he was doing. But he hasn't lost the dream. He says, we want to try and make gold and silver affordable to the average person in the street. To say, look, if I can get 1/10 of a gram, and I can start buying one a month, one a week, and eventually I build it up and it's 1 gram, and then I can get it to 2 grams and 3 grams.
And eventually an ounce.
Correct, but starting somewhere and to accumulate.
And you can always sell that way as well. So you can sell 1/10 of a gram when you actually go to a shop and buy stuff.
Correct, because it's now going to be at a value denomination which is easier to trade. And we now back in the barter system. We now in a currency system, and if we have good digital wallets that are mobile and secure on your phone, you can literally do that transaction instantly, or you can have a card, and the card can be processed exactly the same way as a normal credit card, but it's the same sort of transaction. So people who are very strong in the crypto market are saying we need to make this more consumer friendly. That's kind of the goal they're going for, is to get it more consumer friendly, more consumer available. And it needs to be able to work. Because right now you go, you tap your card, ding, ding, ding. 5 seconds later, the transaction is approved and it's done. We've got to try and get the blockchain to accelerate to that kind of degree, or some other kind of way of making that transaction actually occur in a real-time environment.
Yeah.
But we'll get there. The guys have got to work on it. The question is, these bonkers folks at like the WEF and the central banks around the world, the big banks, because the big banks are the ones that want to control everybody
through the central bank digital currency. And I just want to add to what you were saying there, Bruce, because I had a chat with Davi Ruth back in March last year. And of course, Davi, as most people know, is one of South Africa's top financial experts. And he said the thing that excites him about the blockchain and the crypto was what they call non-fungible tokens, or NFTs. Now, a non-fungible token is where you actually have, just like a Bitcoin, the title deed of your property is actually that non-fungible token on the blockchain. That's where your asset is actually stored in your name on the blockchain through an NFT. And the beauty about this sort of thing, now you consider shares in a business. Let's say you've got a business that sells popcorn, and let's say it's worth 100 Rand, okay? And you've got 3 investors and they've got shares. With a non-fungible token, you can actually then put that on the equivalent of the crypto stock market, and people can come in and they can buy pieces of that non-fungible token just like shares. So if you've got, let's say, 100 shares, or let's say 100 Rand value, they can come in and they can buy, let's say, 1/10 of your popcorn factory, or a fifth of your popcorn factory, or just 1 share in your popcorn factory. So it gives you this incredible flexibility when it comes to investing and things. And that NFTs, or non-fungible tokens, are now being used to actually be part of, for example, a top racing horse, or a Michelangelo painting. They've got NFTs for some of these, and you can actually invest in, let's say, 5% of a top racing horse, and then sell that again later on once that horse has done a couple of really great races and the price goes up. So you can basically trade in just about anything through non-fungible tokens. Is there anything you'd like to just add to the NFTs?
Well, I think one of the areas which you just briefly touched on, which is an area that the average person is simply not aware of or even interested in, is the art market.
Yeah.
So high-value artworks, where you can buy a share, and as you said, so it's like a fraction of the value of the artwork, but you're buying a share in an artwork. So every time that artwork is sold in the market, you get a dividend because you own a share of that piece of art. And that dividend then grows your investment value in that piece of art. And this is an area where the very wealthy, who've got lots of disposable income, have been playing around in artworks because it's an amazing investment vehicle. It is a physical asset. And as the artist gets better known over time, that artwork rises in value.
Yeah.
And it has, it's now a more collector's item. And I bumped into an American guy that I'd worked with for a while, the fighter ace chappie from the Second World War, who was living in Pretoria. That's a whole nother episode of very interesting stories. And he had a windfall where he did a deal and made a lot of money. And one of the things he did was he bought an entire vat. I don't know if it was 12 or 20,000 liters of wine in Stellenbosch. as an investment. So I said, Ben, what are you doing buying a vat? He says, hey, he says, Bruce, you don't understand. He says, this wine has just been harvested. The grapes have just been pressed. It's just been harvested. Now, the winery is now going to keep it in oak for 5 or 7 years or 10 years before it is going to be bottled.
Right.
I now own the whole vat. So the value of recently squished grapes is X, but the value of fermented grapes later on is worth X plus plus.
Yeah.
And I went, you sneaky bastard! This is such an interesting idea. But you needed to have a large amount of cash to basically invest in a full vat of wine. You see, the guys who connected to the wealthy, they hear the wealthy ideas and then they act on them.
Yeah.
Okay, and they take up those opportunities.
Yeah.
And the rest of us run around going, how the heck are these blokes
making
doing
money?
this? So, a guy sits there and he goes, I just bought a new Mercedes S500. And he said, sure, yeah, it's a 1.5 million car. That's nice. Eh? He says, yeah, use 1 Bitcoin. Or I used 3 Bitcoin. I think the guy used 2 or 3 Bitcoin. It was a few years ago to buy himself a new Merc.
Wow.
And it's like, like the guy who got the 150 for the burger, did he keep it?
Yeah, exactly.
Did he know to keep it?
Or did he lose it? Can you imagine if that guy lost that bit of code with 150 Bitcoin on it, because maybe he threw his phone out or whatever? That's where it becomes a bit freaky for me, because as someone says here, Michael says, there's only an electronic value to Bitcoin. You cannot hold it in your hand or operate payments when electricity fails. And that to me is kind of why I'm a bit... I made a lot of money out of Bitcoin a couple of years ago. We actually had a fellow who was a trader and expert. And what happened was one of the alt tokens, it was one that Elon Musk suddenly had a great interest in, and he bought into this quite big. And of course that got out in the news, and I was one of the first people who read this, and I thought, okay, this is interesting, because I know when Elon Musk does something, it's rather like when America has a cold, the whole world gets the flu. So I've invested quite a sizable amount into this token, and it just exploded in price. So, I've always had this thing, don't be greedy. So, a couple of weeks later, I sold out, made an absolute killing, and then the price came down again, not long after that. But, those are the sort of things, if you watch what's happening in the news and you start saying, well, hey, this is going to impact this, that, and the other, you can actually then do very well. Now, mate, look, we could talk about this all night, and I know it's getting late in South Africa. It's a fascinating subject, and I just want to close up by asking you to just talk to us about the new vlog that you're going to, or video blog that you're going to be putting up on Loving Life TV. Do you want to just tell us what its name is and why you're going to call it that?
All right. So, folks, those of you who weren't aware, I was on like a week ago. So I got connected with Scott through a mutual friend, who, interesting enough, is the ear, nose, and throat surgeon that fixed my wife's sinuses many years ago, and we've stayed friends ever since. And the interesting thing is that in our chat last week, we were just doing a general chat about my journey on COVID and what I'd experienced and how I'd come to understanding whether this thing was safe for me to go for the jabs or not to go for the jabs. And there are a lot of factors that when you look at life through many different lenses, you need to learn the lessons and see what is available from the lessons in life and then put them into practice and to use them. And the older we get, and I'm not a youngster anymore, but the older we get, we can look back and see that what we were believing when we were younger, and as information came to light, how our thoughts, perceptions, ideas, beliefs had to change, which means our decisions begin to change. So Scott said, why don't I come up with a vlog that I can put together and start working on and put episodes into place where I can just chat about a general subject. So I've decided to call it Unbox Your Brain with Bruce. And the reason for that is twofold. There are two areas. One is so many of us, we have literally been bashed and boxed and bruised and battered and attacked and cajoled and scolded and told to sit down and shut up and be quiet, and sort of kept in the dark like mushrooms, many of the different cliches that come to mind. The point is this, is that if you feel that you've been shut in, then isn't it so refreshing when you have an opportunity to break out of those confines and to then say, look, let's look at the world. So Paul J. Meyer had an expression that he used the one time, and I never forget it because the illustration was so graphic. He says, for so many people, living life is like you are running down a very long trench, and at the end of that trench in front of you is your gravestone. And every now and then you sort of jump up a little bit and you look around you and you see a completely different worldview of people enjoying themselves, having a wonderful life and enjoying riches and wealth and peace and happiness and everything around them. But then you drop back down in your trench and you are focused on your immediate world. And he says, it's a grave. It's just a long grave with your headstone at the end of it. That's all you're heading towards. Is that really what the purpose of life is about?
Yeah.
So the one area is that we get so bashed and battered and bruised to stay in that box because it suits other people that we stay in that box. The other part about unboxing your brain is I want people to have this idea of being able to think wider, think broader, start looking at what were possibly, and remember, everybody says every conspiracy theory starts out as a theory. And then what do we do in science? We test the theory until we can find the factual basis for it and then repeat it. Well, a lot of the conspiracy theories suddenly turn out to be, not so conspirational, but maybe some of it's designed. And as we begin to join the dots, a new picture emerges. Now, the thing is, when that new picture emerges, what are you going to do about it? So those are the kind of subjects I want to discuss, things that will provoke thinking, open your mind to new ideas or different thinking. I draw from a lot of different sources. I've quoted a number of those sources. Even tonight, I've talked about Jared Diamond's things. Now, Jared Diamond, anthropological, biological evolution. There's certain things I agree with, certain things I don't agree with. But the gist of his message is, this is how it panned out. This is how some countries have a better package. Some people have a better package or technology or ability than others. And how did we get there? Why do we have a dichotomy of markets, people, abilities, techniques, and talents? And, there are realities in life where you will look at people and you will say to them, we need work to be done or so on, and they do not perform well. And no matter what you try, they don't perform better. And in fact, there's a biblical concept for that. Some are a 30, some are a 60, some are 100. There's nothing you can do to change that. Now, once you understand that these are practical things at play, you can now work with them. So what I want to do is bounce ideas around, then look at the comments that come from that. And after that, build on top of it and say, okay, these are some of the ideas, these are some of the things people want to talk about. How can we do that? How can we engage with a wider audience to look at things from different perspectives? And I'm also there to learn. That's the one thing that I find with what I do is auditing management systems. It's one of my business activities that I do. So I go to different companies, I see different technologies, I see different methods of how things are being done. And it's an absolute eye-opener, because when you look at, they're using the same base system, but they are using it for so many different types of purposes. So what I've learned from that is never assume anything. There are so many different ways things can be done. But when you talk and sit with people, one of the things you learn is that, you know what? We're all pretty much the same. We're all pretty much looking for the same things. We want a peaceful, happy life. We want a roof over our head that doesn't leak, a bed in which we can sleep soundly, and food in our belly that gives us the nourishment we're looking for. No matter where you go in the world, who you talk to, those are the same basic things that we all want. There are other forces out there that have other plans. And when you become aware of what's going on at different levels, then you start asking yourself, okay, what am I going to do with the information? So here's the choice. If you want to know, listen. If you don't want to know, don't tune in. Because once you get opened up to some of the new ideas, you can't go back and say, oh, but I didn't know. And that's what I want to do. I want to explore those boundaries. I want to explore those edges, science, technology, religion, faith, you name it, working ethics, morality, whatever the subjects are that come up. I want to explore them and then put them out there and say, okay, guys, give me your feedback, give me your comments, and what are your viewpoints?
Yeah.
Because if we don't have dialogue in life, and the one thing we want to get over, very importantly, George Bernard Shaw said, the greatest challenge with communication is the assumption that it has happened, or the illusion that it has happened. We don't want to have that going on. We want people to understand that we as humans were designed and built to communicate with each other, and that we should be doing a lot more of it. But we need to do meaningful communication. So not a 30-second soundbite or a TikTok or something of that nature, but something with a bit more depth and substance to it, and hopefully thought-provoking. Because that's how we can dig around in our brains to find out, are we still in the box or are we outside the box?
Yeah, we never stop learning, do we?
Well, this is it. Absolutely. And, that's why I will still read books, and I will still read biographies, and I will still, I'll go back to my books with Tony Buzan on how to improve your memory and your mind. And now I'm learning a lot more about the role nutrition plays in that.
Yeah.
And it's like, wow, but I didn't know this when I was growing up. I didn't even know this when I was raising my daughter, and now she has done all this research into, with my grandson, into like the proper nutrition, the proper time and the proper way. And all of us, we now have access to information that even 30 years ago we didn't have.
Yeah.
So...
an area that I'm finding fascinating, and it's something we're exploring on Loving Life, and that is how our spiritual body actually communicates with God. Because, there's a lot of really interesting stuff about what they call frequencies and vibration and energy. And, the more I hear about this, the more it's starting to make sense that our understanding of who we are physically is just one dimension of a multifaceted body, and vibration and energy. You walk into a room, for example, and you see someone across the room. Let's say there are 50 people in the room, but there's a woman across the room from you, and you have this one little glance. You look at each other, and there's like this bang connection. It's like, what is it? This is not something that is physical. It's in a different dimension. But I think everybody listening here has had that moment in their lives at some time where that has happened, where you feel like you know that person, that there's something about them that you want to go and talk to them about, and they're feeling the same. You can actually feel that mutual impact. It's what they
Yeah.
call love at first sight sort of thing. These sort
Scott,
of energies. Yeah.
I've spent 30 years studying the spiritual realm. So it's an area where I had a long journey to get there. And that could be one of the stories I'm going to tell.
Fantastic.
Is how did I get into that journey, and then where it took me. And later on, my encounters with evil and good, but I've actually encountered evil. I have worked with people to release them from bonds of demonic oppression. And folks look at me and they go like, "What do you mean? You've helped set people free from demonic oppression, etc." I said, when you first realize that we are a spiritual being, the first question you then have to ask yourself is, all right, what does that mean in the context of my life and where it is going?
Yeah.
And how it connects to every other person around me. Then when you look at that realization, you also have to do a self-check and say, so many of the assumptions that I've been told about who and what I am are not correct.
Yeah.
And you have to readjust. And that is hard. It's not easy to do that. So when we then delve in deeper and discover there actually is a spiritual realm at work all around us, and that it is active and it is live and there is activity going on in it, now you have a choice. Do I want to know? This is my unboxing question. Do you really want to know what's going on in the spiritual realm, or would you rather not know? What is at stake if you remain ignorant? What do you gain to benefit if you learn more about it? Okay. And my intro to that was accidental through studying martial arts.
Right.
Initially, and that'll be part of one of the stories I'm going to tell, is how suddenly I realized, whoa, there's something else here.
Yeah.
And as we look into it, and we look at, like my wife and I were discussing just yesterday, we were talking about things like Ayurvedic medicine. We were talking about naturopathy. We were talking about, the elements of natural nutrition and so on. And then I said, yeah, but the Bible talks about the fact that your food will be your medicine. The ignorant thing is we don't actually look at our food as a medicine, because we don't want to have to learn about, hey, if I take this herb or this spice, this is what it's going to do in my body, and that's the reason why it's good for me. Oh, yes, you should be eating more kale and collard and broccoli and cauliflower, etc. Why? Well, it contains selenium. I don't know where the heck the plant gets the selenium from, but it's making selenium. Well, okay, so why should I be eating these things? Because they're not really like my total favorites, And they said, but selenium is anti-cancer.
Yeah.
You get longer life. It promotes anti-cancer.
Apricot seeds apparently are fantastic for pushing back on cancer.
Concentrated acids and amino acids and stuff in some of these seeds and so on, and what they can do. If you're somebody that is getting sugar shakes, okay, take about 5 or 6 almonds, raw almonds, pop them in your mouth, chew them, and you will balance your sugar in your body. It's like it's quick. You could take a chocolate bar and achieve the same thing, but the effect won't be long lasting. But almonds will absorb, digest, and balance your sugar shake for a much, much longer period of time.
Right.
It's like, oh gosh, okay. Yeah, and you know what? They're probably cheaper than a chocolate bar.
Mate, look, we could talk for hours. I'm going to have to wrap up this live stream. We've been going for over 2.5 hours, and it's been fantastic, and I've really enjoyed it. I just want to pick up on the vibration side just in as we wrap up. And something that a lot of people don't realize is that our vision, you can see the computer screen, you can see Bruce on your computer screen. Our vision, when you take the entire light spectrum into account, is not even 1% of the full extension. I mean, it's the 99% of what is out there we cannot see. We can only see this tiny little piece. And when you think of air and a plane taking off and the wings cut through the air, because there are molecules of oxygen, nitrogen, dare I say it, carbon dioxide in there as well, which is why planes fly, because air is not actually just an empty vacuum. It's actually full of stuff. So when you look at your visual side and what's going on outside your visual side, which is very limited, this is where the spiritual aspect comes in, because we have this very restricted outlook through the restrictions we have in our vision. And it to me, it's a fascinating area, because look, I've seen some things. I'm an old fart, okay? I'm on my way to 70 next year. So I've seen some really disturbing, some fascinating, some strange, weird things happen in my life that you cannot explain with normal science. And we're going to unpack that as we move along. But Bruce, thank you so much for joining me tonight, and it's been a great chat. I really appreciate it. What I'll do is you've got to, you know, when we talked about the clipper ships and that kind of stuff, about the movement of goods and services, often they would like press gang young men to be sailors. And Marlena's very good. She press ganged me into this one. So even though it is Valentine's, and I wish everybody a wonderful Valentine's, you know, she said, look, there's somebody had pulled out and she wanted to, you know, somebody at short notice. So I said, look, you know, I'm trained in extemporaneous speaking. That's something that I did. I don't have a problem with that at all. So I can pick up a subject, any old subject, and work it out and talk about it. And if I don't know what it is, I'll tell you what the opposite is. So I have a lot of fun in doing that, and I do enjoy it. And I think basically for a lot of us, you know, during COVID, we weren't allowed to talk to anybody. So now that we are free of this rubbish, we kind of overdo it a little bit. But yeah, the idea is to have fun, to exchange ideas, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I mean, our first chat was good fun. This one, you know, the topic is huge. We really just scratched a bit at it, but hopefully it's given people some insights and some food for thought. And all I can say is, guys and girls, there are moves afoot to enslave you further. And if you wish to resist, you need to prepare. That's basically it. Thank you very much, Bruce, and I look forward to starting putting your videos up so we can get your message out there. And have a great evening, mate. Super. I'll take your offer up on some help on OBS, and we'll get it done. Alrighty. Fantastic. Thanks, mate. All right. Bye for now. Super. Good one. Cheers. All right, guys. That was Bruce Mills, and as we were just talking, Bruce is going to become a co-presenter on Loving Life TV with videos that will challenge your beliefs and make you think outside the square, and I think that's a good thing. Now, I'm going to go out with this is a very interesting but short theme song, and it's Klaus Schwab, and he's singing, "You will own nothing, but you will be happy." Oh, I'm not joking. This is serious.
Here's a little song I wrote. You might want to hear it in your pod. You'll owe nothing and be happy. Ain't got no cash, ain't got no car, but 24 booster shots in your arm. Owe nothing, be happy. You can't even buy shit in the store because of your low social credit score. Oh, nothing. Be happy. You'll own nothing and be happy.